do is envy, so they dying now. She knew that was my brother, I can't figure why she crying now. Savage got me popping perkies, now I'm zoning out. We got the city, every show with us look like it's rolling out. Niggas don't be chasing, pay attention.
The 12th of January, 2022, Chicago, Illinois, 7:30 inches the evening. A dark-colored vehicle pulls up alongside a parked car on South Vincennes Avenue on the city's south side. Two men get out. They walk toward the parked car with purpose, no hesitation, no argument, no words exchanged. They draw handguns and open fire into the vehicle. Multiple shots. Then they get back in their car and drive away. The whole thing takes seconds. Inside the car they left behind, slumped over the steering wheel, 4 months pregnant, was 29-year-old Durka Patrick. Her niece had been sitting with her just moments before. She had run inside to grab a birthday cake for a family celebration they were about to attend. She heard the shots. She ran back outside. And she found her aunt, her heavily pregnant aunt, dying in the driver's seat. Durka was rushed to the University of Chicago Medical Center. She was pronounced dead on arrival. Her unborn son, whom she had already named Baby J, already loved, already imagined a future for, did not survive either. The two men who walked up to that car, fired into it, and walked away have never been publicly identified. Disclaimer: this video contains descriptions of gun violence, the murder of a pregnant woman, and the death of an unborn child. These details are difficult. Please use your discretion before continuing. Everything covered in this video is drawn from verified public sources: Chicago Police Department statements, news reporting, community appeals, and court records. Our purpose is to tell Durka's story with the honesty and the weight it deserves, and to examine something that her case puts directly in front of us: what happens to a family, a community, and a city when a murder like this goes unsolved, year after year, while the people responsible remain free. Her name deserves to be spoken. Durka Patrick, 29 years old. Now let's go back to where this story truly begins. Not on South Vincennes Avenue on a January evening, but in the life of a woman who was building something worth living for. The 12th of January, 2022, Chicago, Illinois. Durka Patrick, known to everyone who loved her as Dara, was 29 years old. The youngest of 6 children, raised in Chicago with 4 older sisters and a younger brother, she grew up inside a family that understood itself as a unit. Loud, close, present for each other. The kind of family where showing up was not optional and love was expressed through action rather than words.
Her mother is hurting that she can't speak. I'm hurting, but I hurt for her, her family, my family, her baby. She has a 9-year-old daughter.
She carried that energy into every room she entered. Friends and family described Dara consistently, and without contradiction, upbeat, warm, the kind of person who made a room feel different just by being in it. In a city like Chicago, where the weight of daily life in certain neighborhoods can be suffocating, that quality was not incidental. It was a deliberate choice she made, repeatedly, to be a source of light rather than add to the darkness. She was a hairstylist, and I want to be specific about that, because hairstyling in a community like hers is not just a service, it is a relationship. Her clients came back not only because she was skilled, though she was, but because sitting in her chair felt like being genuinely seen. She listened. She remembered. She asked about the things people had mentioned last time. She made every appointment feel less like a transaction and more like a conversation that mattered. She had a 9-year-old daughter who was her entire world, and in January 2022, she was 4 months pregnant with her second child, a boy she had named Baby J. She was excited in the way that people are when something they have been anticipating begins to feel real and close. Her family said she was more joyful than she had been in years, more present, more oriented toward the future she was building. She had plans beyond the salon. She wanted to become a nurse. She wanted to expand the ways she could help people, to move from cutting hair to something that touched lives differently. The ambition was genuine, and the timeline was forming in her mind. On the evening of the 12th of January, 2022, she was getting ready to go to her cousin, Devontae's birthday party. The evening was supposed to be exactly the kind of night that defines a life: family, laughter, celebration. The simple, irreplaceable joy of being with the people you love. She never got there. Devante would later tell reporters, "She was on her way to me." She never made it. Chicago Police Department investigators arrived on South Vincennes Avenue quickly after ShotSpotter technology alerted them to gunfire in the area at approximately 7:30 p.m. What they found at the scene and what surveillance cameras in the area recorded gave them a clear picture of what had happened, even as it raised more questions than it answered. A dark-colored vehicle had pulled up alongside Durka's parked car. Two men exited. They approached her vehicle, not running, not reacting to something that had just happened, but walking with the deliberate pace of people who had already decided what they were going to do. They drew handguns. They fired into the car multiple times. They returned to their vehicle and left. There was no argument captured on the footage, no confrontation, no exchange of words, no moment that looked like a situation escalating into something unplanned. What the footage showed was not rage. It was not spontaneous. What it showed was intent. Investigators noted this immediately. The word they used was targeted. These men had not pulled up beside a random car. They had come to that specific location, at that specific time, to shoot the person inside that specific vehicle.
Don't think for one moment that we're going to let you get away with this. We are going to pursue you and bring you to justice.
Durka Patrick had no known enemies. She had not been involved in any reported conflicts. She had no history of violence or association with anything that would explain why two men would walk up to her car and open fire without a word. The footage was clear enough to show the crime. It was not enough to identify the men who committed it. Their faces were obscured. Their vehicle was not immediately traceable. They had come prepared to leave without being identified. And they succeeded. Chicago Police Superintendent David Brown addressed the press and vowed publicly that those responsible would be pursued and brought to justice. A $15,000 reward for information was announced. It was later raised significantly. The department appealed to the public, anyone who had seen something, anyone who knew something, to come forward. The public response was silence. In the weeks after Durka's murder, investigators canvassed the area. They reviewed additional surveillance footage from surrounding blocks. They followed up on tips. They made public appeals. They raised the reward. They held press conferences. Nothing moved the needle. No one came forward with information that led to an arrest. No witness emerged with a plate number or a description that could be confirmed against the footage. No one in the vicinity of South Vincennes Avenue on the evening of January 12th was willing to publicly say what they had seen. This is the reality of solving violent crimes in certain parts of Chicago, a reality that is rarely discussed with the directness it deserves. The surveillance footage existed. The community knew something had happened. Two men had committed a murder in a residential neighborhood on a January evening, and in the aftermath, the investigation ran into a wall that the police, the family, and the community activists who showed up to help could not get around. That wall has a name in Chicago. It is sometimes called the Code of Silence. It is sometimes described as a rational response to a community where cooperation with law enforcement has historically come with its own risks, its own costs, and its own complications. It is sometimes described as fear pure and simple of what happens to people who talk. Whatever you call it, the result is the same. A pregnant woman's killers walked away, and they stayed away. Community activist Erlive Walker, who joined Durka's family in their public appeals and helped cover the cost of her funeral, put it plainly. This mom deserves answers. This family deserves answers. This community deserves answers. Those answers, as of the time of this recording, have not arrived. To understand what happened to Durka Patrick and why her case stalled the way it did, you have to understand the environment her murder occurred in. 2022 was not an ordinary year for gun violence in Chicago. It was the continuation of a trend that had been building and accelerating, particularly on the South Side and West Side, in neighborhoods where economic disinvestment, over-policing in some areas and under-policing in others, and generations of unaddressed trauma had created conditions where violence became, for too many people, a daily backdrop rather than an exception. In 2021, Chicago recorded 797 homicides, the highest single-year total in roughly 25 years. 2022 continued in the same direction. Durka's death was one of hundreds in a city that was simultaneously grieving and exhausted by its own grief. In that context, a case like hers, a targeted shooting, with surveillance footage of the perpetrators, but no witnesses willing to come forward, was not unique. It was heartbreakingly routine, which is perhaps the most disturbing sentence in this entire story. The people who killed Durka Patrick knew how this works. They understood that a certain combination of factors, surveillance footage without face identification, a community conditioned by distrust of law enforcement, and the silence that follows creates conditions where accountability becomes uncertain. Where you can commit murder in a residential street at 7:30 the evening and walk away from it. That knowledge and the fact that it has proven reliable enough to be acted upon repeatedly across the city is a systemic failure of enormous proportions. Not a failure of any single institution or individual, but a failure of the conditions that make that knowledge accurate. Durka's family understood this. Her mother, Christine, standing in front of cameras with a grief that had no bottom, was not naive about what she was up against. She wanted her daughter back. She knew she couldn't have that. What she wanted instead was for the men who had done this to face consequences. She is still waiting. In the immediate aftermath of Durka's murder, her family did everything a family can do when the official investigation is struggling. They made public appeals, they went on television, they pleaded directly to whoever might be watching, whoever might know something, whoever might have seen that vehicle or those men to come forward. Durka's mother, Christine's words in front of those cameras were not a performance. They were the raw expression of a woman who had lost her youngest daughter and her unborn grandchild in a single evening. She said, "You took a beautiful young lady out of this world. You took her from her family. I can't get my baby back." There is nothing to add to that. There is no framing that makes it easier to sit with. The family also channeled their grief into something lasting. They established a foundation in Durka's name to raise awareness about domestic violence and gun violence in Chicago to ensure that her death did not simply become another number in a statistical summary of a violent. They wanted her story to mean something beyond the tragedy of how it ended. Durka's daughter, 9 years old when her mother was killed, is being raised, surrounded by the love of a family that has refused to let grief become the only inheritance she receives from the woman who was supposed to be.
A plea for justice today from the family of a pregnant woman who was shot and killed this week in Chicago. There is now a $15,000 reward for information about Durka Patrick's murder.
Stephanie Wade live right now with that plea from her family. Stephanie?
Good evening. It was a massive turnout today. The community coming together and releasing balloons in honor of 29-year-old Durka Patrick, who was shot and killed Wednesday evening on Chicago's South Side, just sitting in her car outside of her home.
It hurts so bad, like I want my baby.
A tearful plea tonight from Durka Patrick's mother to find who killed her daughter.
You took a beautiful young lady out this world. You took her from her family. I can't get my baby back. I want my baby. Y'all took my baby from me. God gave her to me for 29 years. And you just ended my baby's life like that. That's not right.
A vibrant young woman her godmother describes and beloved hairstylist on Chicago's South Side, Patrick was 4 months pregnant with her second child when police say two gunmen got out of their car Wednesday evening and opened fire in the 7400 block of South Vincennes Avenue.
There for all of it. She is growing up knowing who her mother was, knowing that her mother was kind and talented and ambitious and deeply loved, knowing that her mother had plans for a nursing career, for baby Jay, for a future that included all of them. That knowledge will not replace what was taken, but it is what the family has to give, and they are giving it with everything they have. Durka Patrick was 4 months pregnant. She was sitting in her car on her own street, minutes from her own front door, getting ready to go celebrate a family birthday. She had no enemies that anyone could identify. She had no conflict that anyone could point to. She was, by every account, exactly what she appeared to be: a mother, a stylist, a sister, a daughter, a woman building a life for herself and her children. and 2 men walked up to her car and shot her. The surveillance footage exists. The investigation was opened. The appeals were made. The reward was raised. The community was asked, repeatedly, to help. And the men who killed her have not been publicly identified, charged, or brought to trial. I want to say that clearly and without softening it. Durka Patrick's killers are still free. Her daughter is growing up without her mother and without the little brother who was supposed to arrive in May. And the men responsible for that have so far faced no consequence. This is not a story about a cold case from decades ago that fell through the cracks of a less capable era. This is 2022. There was surveillance footage. There was a $15,000 reward. There were community leaders and activists standing beside the family at every public appearance, amplifying the appeal for information. It was not enough. The question this case demands, not rhetorically, but as a genuine challenge to every institution involved, is what more should have been done, what can still be done, and what it would take for the people with information about this murder to come forward. Because someone knows something. In a residential neighborhood, on a January evening, at 7:30 p.m., with ShotSpotter alerts and surveillance cameras and neighbors who were home, someone saw something. Someone knows what vehicle those men were driving. Someone knows who they are. If you are watching this and you have information about the murder of Durka Patrick on the 12th of January 2022, please contact the Chicago Police Department tip line. That number is in the description below. Tips can be made anonymously. There is a reward for information, and a family is still waiting for an answer that only someone with information can give them. Durka Patrick was 29 years old. She was the youngest daughter of a family that loved her completely. She was a hairstylist who made every client feel seen. She was a mother to a 9-year-old girl. She was 4 months pregnant with a son she had already named and already loved. She was on her way to a birthday party. She deserved to get there. She deserved to meet baby Jay. She deserved to become a nurse and to keep building the life she was working toward. Her daughter deserves to know that what happened to her mother was not forgotten, that it was not accepted, that the people responsible were not allowed to simply move on while her family carries this weight forever. To Durka's family, her mother Christine, her siblings, her daughter, this story is told in your name. May it reach someone who can finally give you the answer you deserve. If you have information about this case,